And now it's my pleasure to introduce our moderator and guest speakers for this evening. For more than 2 decades, Mary Ann Childers has covered political conventions, natural disasters, a war, and nearly every major breaking story in Chicago. She was the first Chicago TV journalist to report from the Mideast during the first Persian Gulf War. Her reports on breast cancer, AIDS, heart disease, mental health, and women's health have won dozens of awards and national recognition, including 5 Emmys and a prestigious National Emmy for anchoring coverage of the death of Pope John Paul II. Her media consulting firm specializes in strategic communications, video and web content production, and honing on-camera and production skills for Chicago's top business executives, authors, physicians, and others in the public eye. So welcome, Mary Ann. Now I'm honored to welcome our 2 speakers this evening, whose guidance of the Blackhawks has brought 3 Stanley Cup home to Chicago in the last 6 years. Rocky Wirtz is a 3rd-generation family business leader and was named president of the Wirtz Corporation and chairman of the Chicago Blackhawks in October 2007. Rocky was just 2 years old when his grandfather, Arthur Wirtz, purchased the Chicago Blackhawks in 1954. Rocky grew up within the walls of the storied Chicago Stadium, and in 2010, 2013, and 2015, oversaw the team's historic Stanley Cup championship victories. In fact, Rocky and I were remarking that your first game was when you were 10 years old, so that's a long time ago. Very exciting, though. Ask him all about it. Now, additionally, as president of Wirtz Corporation, Rocky oversees a wide array of businesses, from beverage distribution to financial services, insurance, and real estate. Rocky continues to lead his family's dedication to Chicago Blackhawks charities, which has donated millions of dollars to dozens of organizations focusing on youth programs, health and wellness, education, and housing. Now, John McDonough is the current president and CEO of the Blackhawks, having joined the organization in 2007. Now, with John's guidance, the Blackhawks have revitalized the team's profile and fan base. The team's season ticket holder base has grown from 3,400 to more than 14,000, and the Blackhawks have led the NHL attendance for 7 consecutive seasons. Additionally, John was instrumental in bringing the NHL Winter Classic to Chicago in 2009 that drew over 4.4 million US viewers. And prior to joining the Blackhawks, John served as president of the Chicago Cubs, another winning team. And during his 24 years with the organization, the Cubs consistently reached record attendance and revenue figures. In 2008, John was inducted into the Chicagoland Sports Hall of Fame. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming W. Rockwell Wirtz, John F. McDonough, and Mary Ann Childers. Thank you.
Well, good evening, everybody. Do you know what these guys were talking about back during dinner? Would you believe the Cubs? And baseball. Rocky, you know what it's like to go through playoffs, so indulge me just for a minute, because I have to ask John. So you 25 years with the Cubs organizations, and so much of what the Cubs are is because of you. Now, I don't mean you're picking the players, but I mean for a long time when the team wasn't doing well, you had sellouts, you started the 7th inning stretch, You started the Cubs convention, which has been adopted through the world of sports. So John, now, are you proud or do you feel cheated?
No, I'm very proud. I'm happy for them, and I hope that they have a chance to experience what we have been able to experience 3 times.
I'm sure, John, they'd be happy to just experience it once.
Now, there's one thing we want to start with. And Rocky, we're going to talk about what is kind of an elephant in the room for you for the summer, because you started your summer all set to have a 3rd great summer with the Cup and a lot of celebrations, and you woke up one morning confronted with an incident involving Patrick Kane. Can you share with us the kinds of decisions and what your thought process was as you decided how to deal with this?
Well, when you wake up and all of a sudden you realize that there's an incident going on in Buffalo, I mean, certainly you're disappointed, but you're also hopeful that when all the facts come out, whenever that is, that you'll know what's going on. So, people jump to conclusions both on either side of the ledger. And so it's something that it's been a long time. Obviously, the DA in Buffalo has not done something with the case, so you just sit back and wait. But it's something that I just want to wait till all the facts come out before we really know which way to go.
Sure. Now, I want to ask you about a different kind of press and a different story. Do you pay attention when Forbes says your team is now worth $1 billion?
Not for estate tax purposes.
But clearly, that's the kind of story you like to read, and it's a very different story than 8 years when your dad passed away, and Sports Illustrated called the Hawks the worst sports franchise in America.
They got to work at that, though.
You woke up one morning and you said, I own a hockey team. I own a hockey team. What did you find out about that team then?
Well, I found out that we had 13 paychecks and we were about $35 million short. Other than that, there was no surprises that first year. So it was something that you didn't have time to hire a consultant. You didn't have time to go and look for mentors. You just had to roll up your sleeves and get to work and try to get some people in the building. And the best way to do that was to hire, in my humble opinion, the smartest business/sportsman in the country, and that just happened to be right here in Chicago, and that was John McDonough.
All right, now, so can you share with us, everybody thinks that in sports you know everybody on the teams, but that's not always the case. You guys had never met.
No, I mean, when we set up a time that John and I could have a cup of coffee, with all due respect, I knew who he was because I'd been a White Sox fan all my life. And there'd been a long time between drinks there too, but but I had admired the job that John had done. As you talked before, Marianne, obviously they had their record on the field wasn't as good as their attendance, and when you can rebrand an area as Wrigleyville and get consistently good attendance, and on the highly unlikely event they actually raised those ticket prices a little bit, John was able to do that. I admired him from afar. So the first time we went, we set that cup of coffee up. I had to go to Google Pictures to see what John looked like.
What was that meeting like for you, John?
Well, I also had to go to Google to find out what Rocky looked like.
Yep.
You at least were famous.
We had never met before, and I really wasn't sure of the context of the meeting. But within a very short time, I was drawn to his sincerity, his candor, his understanding of our industry, his warmth. And it was somebody that I wanted to pull for and somebody that I wanted to see succeed. And then the conversation took a bit of a detour, and we talked about careers and we talked about business philosophies, and they seemed to line up. And he imparted to me that he would be looking for someone to run the Blackhawks, and it went from there. But what we thought was going to be about a 90-minute lunch, good luck, I want to pass on my condolences on the passing of your father. We were there for 4.5, 5 hours. But it was the best individual professional decision I've ever made. And it's because I had the opportunity to work with and for Rocky Wirtz.
Now, we didn't have to Google either of you. And where did you guys meet that no one could say, I'm surprised people weren't dropping dimes saying, guess who's here?
Well, this was at a time when there weren't 400 people lined up for Rocky's autograph wherever he went. We went to a restaurant in Schaumburg. I live in the northwest suburbs. I wasn't sure what the meeting was about. I said, I'm going to ask him to see if he'll play me on the road, come out to the northwest suburbs. And when he pulled into the parking lot, I wasn't sure that was him. But very distinguished gentleman walked in, and we met out there, and we spent quite a bit of time together, and it felt right. And I came back and I talked to my wife, and after she said, where have you been for 5 hours? I told her the story of my lunch with Rocky Wirtz.
When you walked into the United Center the first day, John, what was that experience like for you?
I realized that the task was going to be more daunting. I had a press conference leaving the Chicago Cubs in the morning, press conference at the United Center in the afternoon, had a chance to meet the staff, and the message was pretty simple. The expectations were going to be higher, the pace was going to be faster, and that I was expecting all of them to be on board. And kind of at that point, and all of us in this room study body language for a living, you could tell a fair number of them said, I'm out. This isn't going to work for me. And because Rocky had provided the autonomy that we had to make decisions on the fly. We had to make really quick decisions, but we had a chance to rebuild something very, very, very special. We didn't have time to worry about what had transpired in the past. Rocky and I had a conversation about bringing Bobby and Stan and Tony back, and that was a very important decision. But we just had to hire right, build it right, have a good blueprint that we put together, and hope that we had the right team on the ice.
One of the first things you did was put the Hawks back on television. Good choice? Yes.
Mary Ann, that was pretty low-hanging fruit, though.
But something your dad did not want to do for many years. Did it give you pause to suddenly be making changes that were so counter to what your dad had done?
Well, it wasn't only my dad, but my grandfather, for those that are been around for a few years, realized my grandfather wouldn't even put the first period of the hockey game on radio. So when I growing up, I didn't, this is before the internet, and you'd have to turn on the radio to find out what the score is about 8:30 at night. So it was my grandfather didn't believe that, if you didn't have it on the radio, people aren't going to show up to the old Chicago Stadium, something that we wouldn't do at the old Chicago Stadium United Center. But I'd worked in the, family business for over 5 years at that point. And so if you put the company first, you do what you think is right. And if you start doing what you think someone else wants you to do, or your father, or in a family business, you're not a very good businessman. So it's something that I thought was right to do. It was it might not have been something that he didn't want to do, wouldn't have done, and I don't think he would ever have done it. I respected him, and I respected his judgment. But when he wasn't here, we're just going to do it a little differently.
What was the game plan, and what was the first thing that you realized the two of you had to do?
Well, Rocky started the engine of getting the games on television. And then we had a number of games on television. And then in 08-09, we needed to get them all on. And we kind of went back to one skill I do have. It's a very narrow skill, but I'm a pretty good groveler. And went to my friends at WGN TV and WGN Radio. One of them is the beautiful and talented Marty Wilkie, who's here in the room, who now runs WBBM Channel 2. And she was at WGN at the time, and I didn't want these people to lose their jobs. If we put the Blackhawks on the air, the ratings that they've had in the past have not been favorable. But I said there's something different there since Rocky took over. There's something different. There's something brewing. It's a very good, young, dynamic team. And they rolled the dice and took a chance on us, and I think it's paid off for both of us.
Mary Ann, we put the first official home game, it was on Comcast Sportsnet, and we went from a 0.2 rating to a 0.4 rating. And if anyone knows of the rating system, that's less than something that the home shopping network would have.
It's a different time. The stadium wasn't exactly filled either at the time then.
No, we admitted to having 10,000 people there, but I think they counted by 2.
Okay. All right, let's flip forward. Go fast forward 8 years. Phenomenal growth. 3 Stanley Cups, almost 4. Every game's a sellout now. Your TV ratings, as we saw, are through the roof. Do you worry because the expectations are so high?
Marianne, we have to run this operation as if we've never won one. And I think that's the mindset that we have. I talk all the time about the importance of hiring the right people. And Rocky and I have had to make some really unpopular decisions on some popular people with jerseys hanging in the rafters and former general managers and making tough decisions. But it's about ultimately getting it right in the big picture, and we've tried to do that. But the mindset at our place is all about humility. It's about being hungry for more. It's not reflecting on any championships. Joel feels that way. We feel that way. Stan Bowman feels that way. Jay Blunk feels that way. That it's nice to have these rings and the celebration and the Stanley Cups, and I'm glad we're past that, but we want to see that Stanley Cup back here again next June, but we're on a different path to do that, and it's not going to be about, I'm a big believer that once you've stopped to admire something you've done, you've stopped, and it's really tough to get started again.
Last weekend, Brandon Saad, who was a former cornerstone of the Hawks, was back in Chicago, but he was wearing the sweater of the Blue Jackets. Is it difficult for you to watch people who were building blocks of your franchise now wearing somebody else's colors and playing for another team?
Well, I think, Marianne, there's a hard salary cap in hockey, and so you constantly have to reinvent the team. We reinvented the 2010 team to 13. I mean, that year we essentially had to trade half the players because of the cap. 13, you had a different team, and the 15. So when they talk about dynasties, you're talking about teams that have the same players from year to year. The job that Stan Bowman and his hockey operations have done is been masterful because you constantly have to bring younger players in, but you just can't wave a magic wand and have those players show up. You have to draft well, but then you have to develop well. So Stan and his organization have worked to develop these players, many of them before we even turn them pro. They're in either junior hockey or college that we work with them before we turn them pro. So I think what you've seen in those 3 Stanley Cups is constantly bringing younger players in. And it is difficult to see a quality young person like Brandon Saad, but you have to be able to hopefully move on and then bring other younger players in underneath them that can take that same position.
Well, I guess I'm asking you about the frustration level because you spend time building a really smart management team, and they're going to find really terrific players for you, and then you win and you have your team blown apart. I mean, is the salary cap, is it fair? Is it designed to make things financially equal among teams, or is it penalizing you for having a fabulous team?
Well, it's meant so that hopefully every team of the 30 teams can make money, and it forces you to look a little broader than just, as John was saying, resting on your laurels. So I think it's frustrating for the other 29 teams. The Hawks have won it 3 times in 6 seasons.
We're sorry.
We're not, John and I, we go to league meetings, we're not real popular.
But
now blame everything on John.
Do you think back-to-back titles are really possible, though, under this cap?
I do. I think it's possible. We almost did it a few years ago. We came up a little short when we were beaten by Los Angeles. But I think anything's possible. I think that a lot of things have to go your way. I think it's hard to win, Marianne. It's hard to win one. It's really hard to repeat. It's really hard to win 2, and it's really hard to win 3. A lot of things have to go your way. But as Rocky had mentioned about Stan Bowman and our hockey operations staff, I'm proud of the process and the system in which they make decisions. It's really healthy. It's a titles be damned approach. It's interesting for me to sit in the room. I don't come from a hockey background, but I have to be better at asking questions than anybody and listening. But I'm really proud of that process and how they do it, and you've got to give them the autonomy, because by the time the explanation gets to me and then I have to pass it on to Rocky, it has to be fluid, and it has to have a big picture feel.
Well, you're really racking up the frequent flyer miles, though, for your scouts. I mean, the NHL used to be mostly Canadians and a sprinkling of Americans, but now the teams reflect the world. You've got Russian, Latvian, Sweden, Finnish, Czech Republic, Slovakia represented on your team. How in the world do you scout these people?
We have a very robust scouting staff, a
Clearly.
very collaborative staff. And one of the things that Rocky emphasized when I came on board was not only scouting, but developing. And some of these are, the Europeans are free agents. We've got players on our team that are college free agents. And we have to do a better job than anybody else finding role players. The reason we have 7 or 8 players locked up long term, they're not going anywhere. They're not going, for the most part, they're not going anywhere. So the players that we build around them, we have to be smarter and more successful than any other teams. And we've been able to, through the guidance of and the hard work of Barry Smith and some others, we've really done a good job overseas.
You've got one new young player who doesn't speak English. I mean, you have cultures you have to bring together as well. How's that working for you?
Well, he's learned some pretty good swear words, though. He's been in Chicago long enough.
Rocky, you seem to have a great relationship with the team captain, Jonathan Toews, who's not only a great player, but he's really a great leader for the team off the ice, and he's shown it in our community here in Chicago. When did you know that this young man was going to be a superstar, not just on the ice, but in our community?
Well, you see, it's hard to identify what a leader is, but when you realize at this young age what kind of quality individual he has, I mean, he has terrific parents, terrific family, and when Stan came up to him and said, "I'd like you to be the team captain," and he was just only the second year in the league. I mean, the first thing he did was call some of the more senior players on the team and ask them for their permission. Instead of going in there and trying to act like the big cheese. And the way he has the ability to bring the group together, we were asking, at dinner about, well, what makes him so special? What makes him special is that people listen to him. He leads by example, but he also has that unique quality that people want to work for him and work with him.
Mm-hmm. Do either of you make your feelings known about who you'd like to see have a lot of ice time?
God help us all.
I don't think we would have won 3 cups if we did.
We have really bright people that make those decisions. They will ask my opinion from time to time, and I will weigh in. But they're on it, Marianne. They're really, really, really on it. And it's interesting to see the relationship, which is key, from the head coach and the general manager, the mutual respect. They don't always agree on everything, but there's a give and take and a really good understanding. But once Rocky and I would weigh in on ice time, I think we'd all be in trouble.
The good thing is John always has a saying is we stay in our lane. And John said, let the coaches coach, the general manager manage. And if we take care of our own knitting, it's fine. But when you start getting in other people's business is when you have, you start micromanaging and you don't have a very good organization.
Now, I've heard that you've only been in the Hawks locker room maybe 3 times. And one time I was there with you interviewing you. Is that true?
Well,
if I own the place, Rocky.
Well, certainly 3 times after the last game we won.
Yeah.
But that's the only time I've ever been in the locker room when the players are there. Because that's their office, it's not our office. And they're certainly always welcome up to the Blackhawk organization, but I don't think that we should be entertained by the players. I don't think that we should ask them to do things. And I think you get a lot of different owners in the NHL that want to be entertained and have the players kowtow to them. We don't believe in that. We believe that they have a job to do. We give them support, we give them training, but we don't go down in their office.
Now, you've said you thought it was dangerous sometimes for owners to be fans, but clearly you love the game. What did you mean by that?
Well, I think if you start running your business on emotion, you got a pretty tough way to do it. So this is a business that someone's writing about you every day or about your organization every day in the paper, and that's fine. But you got to make good, sound decisions and measured decisions. You can't let your emotions run your better judgment.
All right. Speaking of, as we start this season, what's the game plan? How are you going to sustain this growth? Where do you go from up?
We've got to make the playoffs. That's step 1. And so far, it's been we're 3-3. Corey Crawford's 2-2. Scott Darling is 1-1. We've got 6 new players on our team, so it's going to take some time for this cohesion to develop. I mean, there's some unusual statistics that have jumped out already. Jonathan Toews, after 6 games, has no goals and leads the team in penalty minutes. That's not, that's not going to continue. So our big boys have to step up. Our 3rd and 4th line guys have to complement them. I'm confident that that is going to happen. But I really believe, maybe hockey more than any other sport, that if you get in the Derby, if you get in the playoffs, you have as good a chance as anybody else. And we've said that we talk about one goal, and organizationally it has so many tentacles in so many waves, but on the hockey side, it's to get in the playoffs. It's not necessarily to win the President's Trophy and have home ice all the way through. It's to get in, hopefully you're healthy enough to make a deep run. Then a lot of things can happen, and we've been fortunate in that we've been in the Stanley Cup Finals 3 times, and we've won 3 times.
What's the biggest challenge you think you're facing right now with the Hawks?
Sustaining this, and making sure that from a very, very assertive, aggressive way we approach our business, that we approach our team, that we make sure that collaboration is important. Rocky and I have had a lot of conversations about collaboration and cohesion. From 1997 to 2007, the Blackhawks had 7 head coaches and 5 general managers. That's unacceptable. You can't have a regime in place and impart philosophies if you keep changing the people in charge. And the toughest part about this in the last few years, we've had a lot of people come after our employees. Marc Bergevin, who is now general manager of the undefeated 6-0 Montreal Canadiens, was the assistant general manager. Kevin Cheveldayoff, who's the general manager of the Winnipeg Jets, who they've gotten off to a very hot start. At some point, we had a conversation that we've got to put the brakes on this. We've been very, very fortunate, but we have a business to run, and we need to be successful. Recognize and reward those achievements, but we have to look out for ourselves.
After 3 wins, are the regular season games somehow less important? I know every game counts, but I'm trying to think of the mentality here.
Well, I mean, you can dig yourself a hole pretty quickly. So you want to get off to a halfway decent start. And it's a season. So no, these games are very important because you're preparing yourself to go deep in the playoffs. You get our players, they have to assume they're going to play 100 games in the year. So both on the fitness level and on nutritional level, they're working on that. So no, the regular season is very important because you don't want to get in bad habits. You don't want to be able to lose games in the 3rd period. You don't want to be able to slack off and think you can all of a sudden start that engine. So it's very important to get off to a halfway decent start, especially this year. I mean, we played most of the teams in the Eastern Conference. So we haven't even played teams in our own division. So yeah, you don't want to get off to an 0-6 start. I'll tell you that.
Do you feel like at least maybe you've purchased a few years of peace and stability with some of the contracts you signed, including most recently Brent Seabrook?
Well, I think Brent brings a lot to the organization, other than just what happens on the ice, his leadership in the locker room, the type of guy that he is. Rocky talked about Jonathan Toews, how the young players observe him. They observe Brent Seabrook, how he goes about his business. What does it look like to be a professional? 3-time Stanley Cup champion, an all-star, an Olympic gold medalist. He's done it all, and he is part of the glue within our organization, with our team. That was a very, very important signing, and it was a statement signing.
Marianne, what people don't realize is how important the locker room is, and what the esprit de corps and how that is like anyone that runs a business. The esprit de corps is very important, and that locker room is you see it, and when the times are tough is when you want that locker room to be there and those players to step up. And as John was saying, Brent Seabrook is certainly one of those players that might be the quiet leader that you don't see or you don't read about, but he is the one the players do look up
Sure.
all the time.
You've got young players, and they're always under scrutiny, everything they do. John, do you find that these players and these young men are different in some ways than some of the other professional athletes you've worked with?
Well, I think There's a bit of a collegiate feel to this that is unique for a professional sport. There's a unique camaraderie. We're on the road and they spend their time playing video games and they love hanging with each other. And you see all of these nationalities kind of come together because of Jonathan and Brent Seabrook and how they comport themselves. But it's very, very rewarding. One other thing that's very unique is in hockey, you get a chance to meet their parents. It wasn't like that in baseball so much. You didn't see their parents very often, but their parents attend games, they attend practices, you get a chance to know them and really what makes their kids tick. And there's a certain respect level, I think, that is heightened in hockey. Respect for authority, respect for the game, and respect for the other players.
When we look around the United Center, we see a lot more female faces, it seems, as the seasons progress. Are you making a deliberate effort to market to women, to encourage women to be interested in this sport?
Well, absolutely. I mean, 40% of our fans are women. So you saw on that clip, before, is the new store on Michigan Avenue, that we have very, much merchandise that's unique to the Blackhawk store is tailored towards women, and it's not just certain colors that a male might think is that a female might like. You see a number of women tonight that have certain scarves on and stuff that they might not have worn before because they weren't tastefully done. So it's something that's very important that we have, and we understand it. As you said, you look around the stands, you look how many women there are.
You're using a lot more technology. Everybody's cell phone now works in the United Center. How are you using it, though, to grow your fan base?
We have to be on the front end of social media. We've got some very, very talented people. We decided 7.5 years ago that we were going to hire young, dynamic, enthusiastic people that wanted to be part of something that we felt that hadn't been done before. And we were going to give these millennials a chance. And they're really in tune with social media and trends and being in front of it. And they've done an amazing job. They recognize the importance of humanizing our players, which was essential because I think that many of our players were anonymous, or in some instance, our players just didn't have a high profile. So we had to change all of that, and so it's exploded now to the millions of Twitter followers, and we lead the NHL in that. And the hits on the internet and our website are astronomical. Obviously, part of it is winning, but part of it is the creative element as well.
Rocky, how did your family happen to get in the sports franchise business in the first place? This is just one of your many businesses.
Well, my grandfather got in by buying a tenant in a defunct building. So at one time, we had owned the old Madison Square Garden, Detroit Olympia, and Chicago Stadium, and then had the Knickerbockers, Rangers, the Red Wings, and the Hawks. So when Eileen, said that we bought the team in 1954, we might not have told all the truth. We owned 3 out of the 6 teams. We just didn't tell everyone about it.
Would you ever consider another team now?
No, I think we have our hands full. I mean,
That's right.
It's like a good meal. You don't want another one.
Your grandfather, you said, was one of your mentors and someone that meant a lot to you. What kind of advice did he give you?
Well, he was great at saying a few sayings. I mean, I'd get in front of him. I'd be 22 or 23, and he'd have the long desk, and he'd keep it unseasonably cold, and you'd start telling him, trying to con him about something, and he'd look at me, and he'd have his pencil in his mouth. He'd look down at me and said, "You know what, Rocky, you never listen yourself into trouble, and you realize you better just shut up." And so he had a lot of good sayings like that. But I had 5 good years in business after college with him. Yeah, I worked for my father, but he was the one that started these businesses. I mean, he was the person that first in the family to go to college, and it was something that was very inspirational because he was the one that told us it didn't matter what your mortgage was, if it's 2% or 20%, you couldn't afford anything. So because he's a product of the Depression, and it was something that we run our businesses that way for every year, and fortunately for us, we have a very strong balance sheet. And when that 07, 08 years came and there were tough times, thank God for that strong balance sheet.
Is there someone in the world of business outside of the sports world that you particularly admire for style, substance, and the way they conduct themselves?
Well, there's one in the sports business, and it doesn't matter because he's a good businessman, and that's Michael Reinsdorf's dad, Jerry. I mean, to respect him. I think he's done a terrific job. After Dad passed away, he was the first person I called and asked for his advice, and he is something that I think is very, very special.
What advice did he give you?
Go find a real good president.
Who was your mentor, John?
Two of them are in the room here tonight. I've learned so much from Rocky, not just about the hockey business, but the people business. And the other one is sitting at the head table, Andy McDonough, who was so good to me during my Cubs years, and maybe the best networker I've ever seen, best people skills. It was like the McKenna network. Like there's so many arms to it, and he knows everybody. And I would be in his presence, and that's a must. You've got to take that call because there's a pretty good chance you're going to learn something. And it's really the same thing with Rocky. I mean, you sit down and you kind of listen to some stories about the family and the business philosophies, and then you look at things just a little bit differently. And I completely echo what Rocky said about Jerry Reinsdorf. I've known Jerry for many, many years. I've had a chance in the last 8 years to get to know him a little bit better. I think he's going to go down as one of the great owners in the history of sports, period.
What do you think your grandfather would say if he could see the Hawks today and know what's happened?
Well, first, he wouldn't believe the home games are on TV.
Or the radio.
And then he'd say, I can't believe my grandson was that stupid to raise ticket prices as high as he has.
I'd like to ask both of you, what is the piece of, what is the thing that you wish you had known earlier in your careers?
What I wish I had known earlier. Probably, I think, patience. Just being a little bit more patient. It's hard to do when you're younger. You're looking at being aggressive and reading as much as you can, and reading books on leadership, and being informed, and trying to stay in shape, and understanding the dynamics of a business organization, and not over-managing, and probably just being a bit more patient. I think I've evolved over the years in that category, and I think it's been healthy.
We can ask Jillian. She's here.
Yeah, Jillian's here.
Yes.
She may not
Jillian,
agree.
who keeps you in line. Excuse me. Rocky, what about you?
Well, I think that to trust the process and not to micromanage and sit back and let people do their job, and you're going to be there to assist them. But if you start doing their job, then you can't hold them responsible. So I think just sit back and just develop a process and let it unfold.
Yeah. What keeps you up at night?
Well, it's a good question. Especially in the wholesale wine and spirit business, that you can have a supplier making decisions that can take your business away for nothing that you've done, your business has done, just because it's a political decision. And things like that you have no control over. But one day you could be doing X amount of business, you can lop off 10% of your business without anything, and you can't react quick enough. So I think that it's more on the beverage side of the business than it is on the real estate or sports side.
On the beverage side, you have four children, and they're all four working in your business. So as you start thinking about
gainfully employed.
As you start thinking about the future and succession and how to grow your business, what kinds of things do you mull over?
Well, first of all, that I'm very fortunate enough to they have the fourth generation in the business, and that they want to work. There's many people in the audience that have children that don't want to work in the family business, and quite frankly don't want to work at all. And Dad's not going to be there. I keep telling him, Dad's not here forever. You better start doing something. But that they actually have a work ethic, and so we're very, very fortunate to have all the kids that we know they know they're privileged, but they're not spoiled.
But we do talk about this all the time, Marianne. They never come off the books. No matter what the age is, they never come off the books, whether it's cell phone bills or insurance or whatever. They never come off the books.
And hopefully out of your basement.
what you're saying is that the bank of dad never closes.
Never.
How do you both handle the public scrutiny of what you do? You know, there are people in this room who run enormous businesses and corporations, and yet every decision you make is probably going to be in one of our very fine newspapers, or my husband's going to be talking about it on television the next night.
Well, if it's a bad decision, it's always John.
But you have to toughen up.
Yeah, you've got to have,
Thank you.
you know, I could cite an example recently, but you've got to have really thick skin, and this is what you agreed to do. And I think a really good leader absorbs all of the blame and distributes all of the praise and the accolades. That's what a leader does. So you better be able to take the hits when it's tough. It's not an easy thing to do, and you quietly, in your own moments, wish it was going your way. But in your interactions with people, it's a privilege when people come up to you and they want to talk about favorably or unfavorably, whether it's about the Cubs or whether it's about the Blackhawks or whatever it is. Every single one of those interactions matter, and it matters to these people, and it's important to remember their name, and it's important to ask them where they're from and ask them about you and pivot that conversation a little bit so it's not all about you. But I think it's really important that you make that as positive, because I think those things spread.
Rocky, what has this journey been like for you? I mean, I think many people in this room can remember when your dad died and you were on the ice. People were chanting your name, but it wasn't with admiration.
Well, I mean, growing up with the Wirtz, I mean, if you wanted to solicit plenty of booze, you just go on the ice and use the word Wirtz. Dad passed away. We had a moment of silence as people started booing. I mean, there's nothing more embarrassing than you have a moment of silence and people start booing. So it shows you charge them a lot of money, you give them a beer, and you don't give them a chance to boo.
And winning helps.
Winning's everything, and if you ever think that winning's not important, you got something else coming. So we've been very, very fortunate. But I think the important thing, for John and I is if we can convey one thing to our fans, which are our customers, is we can't win every year, but we can try our hardest every year and develop a process and organization that's going to try hard every year. And the one thing about Chicago fans are, if you do that, they'll be there. But they think you're sloughing off, they'll be the first to leave.
Can we talk a little bit about the economic impact of the United Center in Chicago and the economic impact of the Hawks? We're hearing a lot now about the Cubs and what the playoffs are or are not bringing to the city. But you've looked pretty closely at this for the UC.
Well, it is, and both Jerry Reinsdorf and my father did it the old-fashioned way, use their own dough. And so we never asked for anything for state subsidies or aid. We pay 12% off the top for amusement taxes, plus with the boxes and provide to the city coffers and the county coffers. And then by the time you get sales tax, so the revenue is great. And then you have the development on the area. So we're on 21 years around the United Center, and you see what the development has done for the West Side. It used to be take your life in your hands if you wanted to go just from the old Chicago Stadium to Presidential Towers. But now, I mean, there's people going on Damon and going east, and so it really has revitalized the whole area. So it's something that we're quite proud of. I just don't always think that people on the taxing bodies appreciate how much revenue is being brought in.
We hear a lot about incentives and tax breaks and things like that. Oh, this is the one I'm teeing up now for you to hit out of the park. But we do those things to lure businesses to Illinois and to Chicago. Is enough being done to maintain, support, and reward businesses that are staying here and making the commitment?
Well, we were talking about building a practice facility, and we are in that process in the old Malcolm X. To develop hockey and an ice surface in Chicago, because we don't have enough ice surfaces. You can't teach people to play hockey if they don't know how to skate. So it's important that, that we have that, not just to develop the suburbs, but also have something in the city. So we have been able to work with the city, but I think it's something that's very important going forward to do more. And I think that we want to bring events in, and we want to bring cameo events in. We're going to have the Final Four for hockey called the Frozen Four, and so obviously, as Michael knows, we have many basketball events and things that are very unique to Chicago. So the more we can do to bring people in, and quite frankly, on our beverage business, we want to have people in here because we sell them a lot of distilled spirits and wine and beer.
It's part of the event, Rocky.
Well, we got to get money some way.
Rocky, you're making a huge commitment on top of what you already have to the west side of Chicago, an almost $55–60 million commitment for a practice facility, 2 sheets of ice, for a team that practices, but sure not every day for 8 hours. Why are you doing this?
Well, I think it's important to develop the next level of fans, and what you have in the Hawks and how Joe Quenneville runs his practices, it's high intensity, no more than 40 minutes on the ice. He gives them plenty of time to rest their bodies, to recuperate. He is approaching his business at 100 games a year too, and you can't do that by practicing hard and every day. But what we can do is we can promote the sport, and part of that is with youth hockey, plus what we can do to add back to the community. I mean, the West Side has been very good to us, both in the old Chicago Stadium and the United Center, so it's very important for us to add something back into the community, and that is for something for kids to do besides hanging on the street corner.
Hockey's expensive to play. Is the equipment, you see the hockey parents, and it's considered sort of a suburban sport because that's where kids have traditionally been in leagues. How are inner city kids and urban kids realistically going to be able to play this game?
Well, we use our arm with Blackhawk Charities, so there should be no one that wants to learn to play hockey and to skate that can't be able to use the facility. So we have both ice time, which generally is the most expensive, but we also have ability for equipment and teams and coaching. So it's something that we can do and run it much like a park district. So there's no one that wants to play hockey that we can't provide for.
When might we? 40 minutes of intensive practice on the ice. Is that that's a day, or is that every couple of days?
Well, it's maybe, it's probably 3-4 days a week, John.
Yeah, it's Joel, I think's philosophy is rest is really important, especially with a veteran team. And I think he gets a lot done in 40 or 45 minutes. The players know exactly what to expect. It's not drawn out. They know what it is. Boom, boom. They get their workout in. They get practice in. The goaltenders get their work in, and they're done. And the players really appreciate that expedient approach.
In the couple of minutes that we have left, I'd just like to ask you, Rocky, what in your view you think needs to happen here? You were talking a little bit about the amusement tax a moment ago, but to improve the business climate here.
Well, I think that we all know that both the city and the state has, very many challenges, and I think it's something that we have to come to grips to. We can't sweep it under the carpet. I'm not moving anywhere. I'm going to always be an Illinois resident, and regardless of what anyone says. And I'm proud of the city, proud of our state, and I think that we just have to buckle down and not sweep the problems under the carpet.
John, any thoughts on that?
Well,
because you're the marketing guy.
No, I would agree with Rocky. I think the importance of not only with city government, with state government, I'm kind of working together across aisles and just making Illinois a destination for jobs. It's so critical. We're losing some jobs now. We're losing some jobs to neighboring states, and we have to slam the brakes on that. That can't happen. This has to be a destination.
When you think about the Hawks, there was one member of our evening here who wanted to know what you have up your sleeve, John, because you have come up with so many remarkable things that have changed the face of sports for the Cubs and things that have been adopted by other teams. Can you give us a preview, and we promise we'll keep it just between us?
I don't know if it's so much of a secret. I would really love to improve the presentation in the arena. I believe the fan in the arena is the most uninformed consumer of your product. So you're watching the game on television and you can see replays and you can see the broadcasters can articulate exactly who's on what line, what defensive pairings there are, what exactly happened, what the referees are talking about, and obviously on radio is radio. It's very descriptive. But within the arena, and you could do this on your phone probably, but we need to inform your consumer in the arena, whether it's baseball, football, basketball, hockey, of all of the things that are going on, because it's such a sophisticated consumer right now. They want that information, and at some point in the near future, I hope the Chicago Blackhawks are the one that are going to solve that. We're talking about it.
I can't imagine it better. I think you have the best show in town in that arena every year.
We can make it better.
All right, a final question. I'd like to know what you individually did on your day when you had the Stanley Cup.
I brought it to, I was born and raised on the northwest side of Chicago in Edison Park, and they had a very nice event. And my family and I, and a lot of professional friends that have been with me through my times with the Cubs, they're great at asking for complimentary tickets. So I wanted to make sure I saluted my friends and family, and we had a big event at that night in Arlington Heights. We had a charitable event during the day. It was great, and taking it to your alma mater, St. Mary's in Minnesota, that was special too.
Yeah. And you had like a little party, right?
Well, we had 3,000 people through our backyard. And you just see what the grass looked like the next day. But well, we invited all our neighbors, people who would come to the house, the UPS, the FedEx, the postman, the garbage man, the plumber, the electrician, the carpenter, everyone we give a check to. But they all showed up, and what we want to do is share it with the neighborhood and share it with those people around us. So yes, we had our family and friends, but we wanted to make sure that everyone came in, got their picture with a cup. We had something for them to eat and to drink, and
for 3,000 people.
Well, 3,000, and we did it all from 1 to 5. So we just didn't get a lot of chairs to sit on.
And you signed how many pucks that day, Rocky?
Well, of the 3,000, there probably were 2,500 people that wanted their signatures.
All right. Oh. And finally, one last question. What is the ring budget?
I don't know. If I won't ask a question I don't want to hear the answer to.
Okay.
I can tell you, Marianne, we exceeded it.
Yes. We have... How many rings did you distribute this year?
Again, I don't know because I don't want to hear the answer.
It was a few hundred. And Rocky's philosophy from day one, which is something I'll admire about him forever, everybody gets the same ring. The players and the interns and everybody in between get the exact same ring. So imagine if you're a young person working for the Chicago Blackhawks and you're looking for that break and you're looking for some confidence in your career, personally and professionally. You come here and your owner makes the announcement that everybody from the players, what a statement, the players and the coaches and the front office, no matter what level of management, they're all getting the same ring. That's why there is such unique collaboration.
Well, and Marianne, I think the important... It's an organization, and not anyone will set themselves up. So the person answering the phone, to the person scoring the game-winning goal in overtime, to the person in the locker room that's cleaning up after the players, they all roll up to one thing, and that's the one goal to win ultimately the Holy Grail, which is Stanley Cup.
Sure. And I want to point out one thing, too. It probably is more expensive for you to win, Rocky, because he also charters a plane and takes the parents of the players and their family members to the games that are away when it starts getting close and they might clinch. Can I hold your hand for a moment? This hand? Oh, I'm going to hold steady.
Of course, it's 350 diamonds. I'd want to hold your hand, too.
Did you get one for Marilyn?
She got a pendant, my wife.
Yeah, but then she didn't win the Stanley Cup.
No, she didn't, but she had a hang with me that did, though.
I hope you get a chance to see it in person. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.